Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I must say, the mischievous side of me, when I hear like our rules, you can take pictures but not video, and I'm like, what if we take 24 pictures a second? So, but no, that's stretching the rules a little too much. So, I'm so glad you all are here. I had written in my notes to open this with, hello, fellow nerds. And I don't know if you consider yourself a nerd, but I think that this is a little bit of a nerdy subject, so I'm very glad you're here. Let me start this with a question, and that is like, why does the color process matter to you? Like, out of all the sessions you could have shown up for, like, why'd you show up to this one? Thoughts? Anyone?
Because color determines the film.
Yeah, makes a big difference on the visuals, right? Yeah. Any thoughts? Sets the mood, very true. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Kobe.
Really bring the value to the film.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, great. Well, let's jump into this. We're going to be covering a number of things. We're going to start with kind of the primaries, if you're familiar with that term. But we're gonna go through a lot. I want to show you at least my email address. My face is here, but you know who I am. If you want to take a picture of it or write the email address down, I want to give you a moment to do that. If you have questions after the session, I'm more than happy to answer them. I will say, I want to point out, I have 2 R's and 2 T's. For some reason, when a lot of people read my name, they miss one of the 2, and I will not receive your email if you don't have 2 R's and 2 T's in there. So that is my contact info. Also, if you ever want to just chat, I have a YouTube channel, and under every video, there's a little link that says virtual coffee. So if you click that, pretty much you can, it kind of shows you available time slots in the next month that we can just have a little Zoom chat and talk more. So I want to let you know that those are available there. Okay, how to get the most out of this workshop. The first one is to ask questions. I don't know where everyone sits as far as their experience with color, but if there's something you don't understand, there's a very good chance that someone else here has the exact same question. And so that's the hope. This whole thing has been designed for interactions. So don't worry about the session running long if we have questions to chat about. Also, as far as downloads go, when this thing wraps, I'm going to give you a QR code, and there are some helpful files when it comes to learning the tools that I found to be very useful. The only people that are getting it are the people in the class today. So congrats. If you want that, that will be at the end of the session. And I'll do my best to point out, as we're talking through things, what those files are, so you can kind of know what you're expecting in there. And have fun is up here. I am not a stand-up comedian, but the goal is to hopefully make this a good time today. So let us get into this. Here is the problem we're trying to solve. When it comes to color tools, I worked for years on some of these color tools, and I would tweak this tool once, and I'd be like, oh, that made the image a lot better. But I wouldn't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes. Why did that make the image better? I'd be like, I need this to get brighter. So I'd be like, oh, well, this one says exposure, or this one says offset. And I would just, mess with the tool, and sometimes I liked the result, and sometimes I didn't. The goal is we want to know what's happening behind the tools, so that when you encounter problems, you understand how to solve the solution. And that's the goal of today. I'm going to pretty much be giving you a lot of the information I wish I would have known very early on to help problem solve color issues on this. If you've anyone here used DaVinci Resolve, just show for us. Okay, yeah. So we have some references here. So in DaVinci Resolve, right? There's a tool called Lift Gamma Gain, which you might have seen before. Yeah. And there's also a tool called Shadows, Midtones, and Highlights. That's annoying because it feels like they do the exact same thing. But we're going to talk about that in more detail. There's for those of you who Premiere, are there Premiere people here? Great. I think in Premiere they have saturation and vibrance. Does that sound correct? Once again, that's confusing. Why are there 2 separate tools to increase saturation? And what are they doing? So we're going to talk more about how that. Although we're going to be talking about DaVinci Resolve, the goal is these are concepts that can be used throughout any program that you use. So we're going to be giving you some tools that, regardless of the program you have, you'll be able to understand what is going on inside. All right. Well, I want to introduce to you one of my very best friends in learning my color tools, and that is this little guy right here, which is called the gray ramp, which, I don't know, this seems like, when I first was presented this, I was like, how low tech, right? Can't we get something that's, a little more sophisticated to learn these tools? This was an example of a file that's going to be in the downloads for you if you want it. I worked for years without ever using one of these. And ever since I started using it, I use it almost every week to help problem solve issues on projects. Anyone here heard of Company 3 in LA? They're a post-production house. Yeah, okay, great. Company 3, they're like the leading thought leaders for color. And they use this. Like the industry leaders are using gray ramps all the time to help them understand. This can be used in Resolve and Premiere. My sister is a photographer. When she was learning Lightroom, we use this. What is Lightroom doing? How can we get a better idea? So the gray ramp is one of the ways that we do that. So let's start using the gray ramp and some of the other samples that we have and talk about primaries. When you hear the term primary, you just think of something that's going to affect the whole image. Okay? Primaries and secondaries. We'll talk about secondaries later. So this is things like, if you're familiar with some of these terms, right? Like offset, lift, gamma, gain, saturation, color boost. They're designed to affect the entire image. Let us get over into DaVinci Resolve and start looking at how these work. Hey, it's on the screen. That is very good news. Let me do this, make it a little smaller, and I'm going to pull up a waveform for us. All right, has anyone messed with with scopes before, like waveforms? Yes. Okay, I've seen some thumbs up. So yes. What was your name, by the way? Laura. So how would you like, when you see that this waveform is kind of like going like from the bottom corner to the top corner, and this is the image we're looking at, like how would you describe like what's it showing us?
So when I say I've used it, it's been very little.
Oh yeah, you're good.
But to me, it shows us just the contrast of the darkest all the way up to the very brightest.
That's amazing. Yes. So scopes are one of those important things to help us understand our image, and Laura, you did a great job there. You'll see on our image we have the black side on one side and the white side on the other. The waveform just allows us to see how bright the image is across. So you'll notice the black over here is represented at the bottom of the image, and the white is represented at the top. So it kind of looks horizontally across the image to see overall brightness. So let's talk about offset, which is our first tool that we're going to chat about. In DaVinci Resolve, if you've used it before, you will notice offset is this little wheel in the bottom corner here. However, we have a color panel. So we're going to use the color panel. Can I have someone help me with the color panel? Laura, since you jumped, you want to volunteer for the color panel first off? Okay, great. Oh yeah. Okay. So welcome. So the way that we adjust offset is you just hit the offset button right here, and then this little wheel, if you spin it around for us, kind of like one way and then the other way, you can kind of see the image start to bounce around. And go ahead and go like a little higher up and a little down. So if we see offset, it is moving the whole image equally. Right? Like the black is going up and the white is going up in the exact same way. And then go ahead and hit the all button up top to reset it. Offset is the oldest tool in color correction, if you want a little history fact there. Back when films were like only done through film, this was one of the ways that they would color correct. There were little lights, and they would like shine the lights through, and they call them printer lights, and you could actually do some basic color correction. So the big deal about offset is that if you import this into like Premiere or Lightroom, you can start figuring out when you adjust exposure, is this happening affecting the entire image equally or separately? Now, let me show you here. Sometimes when you affect, okay, I don't want to get too far. Let's say right here. One of the other ways that offset is very helpful is if you are ever balancing images. So you're like, hey, there's a white balance issue. We need to fix it. Offset is a great way to fix that as well. Let me kick that again. Can you go ahead and just mess with the wheel in the, the ball in the middle. Yes. So go ahead and pull it like in one direction. Keep pulling it, feel. Yes, and keep going. Do you see how the image is getting progressively more blue, right? It's going in one direction. And you'll notice all channels, right? You're getting more blue, red and green. It's affecting all channels equally. Like it's not bending that curve at all, which is really helpful. When you're matching shots, offset is one of the most helpful things because it's not doing weird things to your image. It's a very simple and global adjustment. All right, go ahead and hit the all up top just to reset it again. So let's here, I'll have you pop up from the chair real quick. So let's do a little experiment here, and that is here we go. Another way to affect when Laura. Oh, feel free to grab a seat. Yeah, you're good. You'll notice as Laura was kind of dragging offset around, and I can do this on the screen here, those channels are moving kind of like all at the same time, if you see that, right? What you can actually do is if there's ever just too much green in your image, you can jump over here to offset in each individual channel. So let me reset this. If you ever have an image with too much green, you can just say green, less green in the image. Does that make sense? I find that printer lights, that's the term for them, printer lights, because you can just affect each channel individually. So like if you have too much red, you can just drop the red out of the image. This is why it's so nice for like matching cameras, matching white balances. You can say, too much red, just want to drop that out. Let's do a little experiment here to reinforce this further. I have purposefully messed up a grayscale for us, and we're gonna have fun getting it back to neutral. All right, sorry, give me a second while I set this up. What you're seeing here is, so we just call this the parade, which is a little different than a waveform. You'll just see it separated into red, green, and blue. So you can affect each channel individually. So if I'm in the printer lights and I drop red, see how it's only affecting the red channel? And if in this example, we have too little green. Do you see how green's not touching the top yet? I can just add a little green. And what do we see about blue? We have a little too much blue, right? Because we got a gap there at the bottom. Drop blue. And we have a neutral image, right? By looking at the scope, we can say, a little too much red, a little too much green, and we can adjust it. So let's have someone give this a try. I'm going to pull a second little clip here and reset. All right, someone want to jump up here and try to solve this one? Yeah, Colby, let's do it. All right, so the goal here is, so if this was like, let's say this is a clip in real life, we notice that it has too much green, maybe under like fluorescent lights sometimes give it too much of a green cast, and we want to bring an image towards neutral. So printer lights are right down here. Feel free to grab the mouse. So red channel, right? We're noticing that the red is a little low. Bring the red up to neutral. Sweet. Green channel, it's a little much. Yep, bring it down. And blue, really low on the blue. So yep, keep clicking that one until we get it back up to neutral. There we go. Basic shot balancing. Really nice. Printer lights. I use them all the time. Sweet. Thank you. Killed that one. Way to go.
Can you show us how you get to that particular view of your scope?
Without a doubt. Let me get out of this. Most of the time when you're in Resolve, it kind of looks like this. Are you referring to just like selecting it here?
Okay. So it's just parade is what you call it if it's not equal to that.
Yep. Yeah, parade. So there's a little drop down. Oftentimes I have it set to waveform normally. But yes, if you just pull the drop down, go over to parade, you can see that individually. So this is also useful. Sometimes people will put a little gray card in front of the frame before they shoot. Like, this is a great way to neutralize images if you have that. All right. That is looking good. Great. So we've covered offset. Once the overall look for a film is set, right? So we often do vision casting at the beginning of the film. This is the tool that I most often use once the initial vision is set to match and adjust between things. Okay, next tool that we're going to look at is lift, gamma, and gain. Let me pull the waveform up again. Expand that for us. How are we doing? Okay, we're doing great on time. And let me reset. Reset, go back to our gray. All right. Can I have someone else volunteer to hop on the color panel for me as we demo one of these other things? Another volunteer. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for jumping up here. What was your name?
Bijou.
Oh, sorry. Give me that one more time.
Bijou.
Bijou. Nice to meet you. All right. So we're gonna mess around with lift, gamma, and gain. So So this tool is gonna be used for the gain, and this is gonna be for the lift. So go ahead and just kind of spin the outside wheel, and we'll see what gain does to our image. So yep. And go ahead and bring it back down. So when we see gain is really helpful because you'll notice that it's picking the white point of our image. It's not affecting the black point. When you most of the time when we think through white balance, we think through affecting the white point of an image, right? Like what is white considered? This is a very helpful thing when we're looking at like the top of the image. So go ahead and hit the all button to reset it, and go ahead and spin this one. So this is our lift at the bottom. Do you notice how lift is like the opposite of gain, right? We're taking the bottom of the image, dropping it down, or we can lift it up, and we're not affecting the white point. We're not affecting the top. You'll also notice that as the image moves, it's not like wavy or curving in strange ways. We would call this like a linear adjustment. It's adjusting the whole thing in a line there. Okay, go ahead and let me just reset these here. Yeah, great. Thank you for your help demoing that. Now let's jump over to. I have once again messed up our gray waveform for someone to help us solve here. So can I get another volunteer to help fix this image? Another volunteer. Okay. Yes, absolutely. All right, so what we see here is when we're looking at our grayscale, you notice that we've clipped the whites out, so the highlights are way too clipped, and the shadows are also way too clipped as well. So we want to bring both of them back into the same place. So go ahead, start with the highlights, and you can start spinning to see which way is down. And go ahead and bring that until we've kind of correctly placed the waveform in that top corner. Perfect, yeah. Oh, I think you might have touched the wheel there, or the ball. Let me reset that real quick for you. There we go. Okay, go ahead and with just the outside ring, bring it down, bring it down. Great, 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 great. Perfect. Yeah, you can bring it up till it touches. Sweet, and then let's go ahead and fix the shadows, which is the lift over here. Yep, bring it up so it touches. Excellent. There we go. You've correctly fixed the image. Way to go. The lift and gain are, once again, the tools that you tend to use to match shots because you're not doing anything weird to the image. You're just lifting up the black point and lowering the white point. Gain, as you'll find, is, let me mess around with gain here. So what do we notice about gain? So what is, if someone was to describe what gain is doing to the image, what would you, what was that? Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, gamma. Thank you for the correction. So how would you describe what's happening to the image as we affect the gamma here? Yeah, there's kind of a curve to it. And what's happening to white and black?
They're both locked in, but it's like the midpoint is shifting.
Yep, and that's exactly right. So what's tricky about so many tools is sometimes when you use slides that make the shot brighter, sometimes they won't tell you this, but they're really just affecting the gain. They're not actually making the whole shot brighter. So let me show you what this might look like. If we were to pull a little test frame here, the reason why you want to test your tools is, I think Premiere might do this. Premiere might have a brightness slider, and instead, I'm going to use offset. You'll notice, oh, wait, why is that? Oh, my node is locked. We need a node. There we go. So if we use offset, we're making the whole image brighter and darker in an even way. It's not doing anything super weird to the image. But if we use gamma, you notice how the image is starting to skew a little bit? Like it's not all moving equally. Some tools will do this for their exposure slider. So that's why you want to bring in a grayscale, and as you're learning, like as you in Premiere, you bring it in, you mess with exposure, you want to know, is it adjusting the image consistently? Or is it adjusting the image in kind of ways where the image starts to skew as you move it around? So different tools use different names for how that works. Okay, lift, gamma, gain. Lift and gain work, as we said, in a linear way. So how about shadows, midtones, and highlights? Let me go over there. Another volunteer for shadows, midtones, highlights. With someone? Yes, Will. You want to jump over here? Let me pull up. Excellent. That is great. Okay, sweet. So the way we get to these is go ahead and hit the log button, and then go ahead and just spin the ring for us, and we'll see what happens. So what is happening when we adjust the highlight tool here? Yeah, it's pulling it up, but it's different than gain, right? Gain was bringing the whole image in a linear way. We call that like a linear contrast, whereas this one's just affecting the very top end. Some tools, when you pull the highlights around, will do this. Go ahead and spin the bottom edge for me. So this is the shadows. Yep. So what are we noticing about how it's affecting shadows? Yeah, it's kind of the lower half. It's affecting it. Sometimes you'll hear the term highlight roll off and shadow roll off. This is kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about how are we rolling off the highlights nicely and the shadows. And go ahead and spin the midtones for us. So any observations on how this midtone is different than gamma? Do you remember when we were looking at the gamma adjustment?
It's not affecting the further ones apart.
Nearly as much as the whole image. What you'll find is you rarely ever use this adjustment because it's too small of an image to look at. But yeah, so lift, gamma, gain, shadows, midtone, highlights. Anyone want to describe how they would separate lift and gain from shadows and highlights? Yeah, yeah. One's linear and one, some people call it non-linear. Yeah, one's linear, one's non-linear. I know. Very, very complex. Thank you, Will. I appreciate it. Yeah, one's linear and one is non-linear. And most of the time, when you're doing shot matching, you want to work in a linear way. All right, let me make sure I'm not getting too off track here. Okay, that is good, that is good, that is good. Sweet. Next thing, let's talk about saturation versus color boost or vibrance. Let me find a good image for us to work off of. Vectorscope. That should be a good call for us. We're gonna make this a little bigger. All right. Good. That is working great. All right. New volunteer. Someone who wants to try out the color panel. Can I have someone hop up here? Yes. Okay. Go for it. So we're going to talk about the difference between saturation and color boost or vibrance. If you see right, there we go. There's saturation. Go ahead and crank the saturation up for us. For those of you who have never seen a vectorscope before, a vectorscope is simply trying to tell us how saturated an image is and then what color is being saturated. So you'll notice we have like all the colors represented, so they're growing in this way. So go ahead and twist it up and twist it down for us. You'll notice that the whole image is being affected pretty equally. Kind of like how we said lift and gain worked equally across the whole image. Yeah, go ahead and crank it back up. Saturation works very similarly. Go ahead and press the button to reset it. And now, press saturation down. And go ahead and now use color boost. Color boost is sometimes also referred to as vibrance. Any observations on how this one's operating differently than saturation? Any thoughts?
Is saturation, does one affect more like tone, like warm and cooler tones, and one is actually having the actual color?
So yes, so it's affecting all the spectrums equally. So it's not like just doing one or the other. Here, let me if I can just jump in here real quick. Let me do this really, really fast. So do you see? So let's see how this is growing and shrinking. Let me try saturation. Any observations about the difference between this? So here's color boost, and here's saturation.
One is equally distributing it, and then one is actually increasing.
Yep, that's exactly right. So saturation, we talked about that like idea of like linear contrast. Saturation works equally across the whole spectrum of the image. Like that's the goal. And color boost ends up working out. It expands. It gives more saturation to the middle of the image. So as it grows out, we're adding saturation in the middle. So thank you so much. Let me hop over here. One way that it's helpful to think through the difference between saturation or color boost is saturation tends to work like a multiplier. So if you have something that's at 50% saturation and you multiply it by 2, you get to 100. But if something has 0 saturation and you multiply it by something, it's still at 0. Doesn't do any good, right? Color boost and vibrance tends to work like addition and subtraction, where if you have something that's at 10% saturation and you take 10 saturation out, it goes to 0. But if you have something that's at 90% saturation, it just moves to 80. I don't know if that's fully... any questions about that? I feel like I might not have described that in the best way.
It's mostly helpful in things like color in your skin tones and things like that.
Definitely. Yep. So here's a little example of if we have this cute little monkey image for us. One of the things that we often think about is we want our neutrals to be neutral, right? We really like that. Sometimes in commercials, we'll want like very clean whites or clean grays. What you can do is, because color boost ends up working like subtraction, if that makes sense. So if something's at 20% saturation and you take like 20 out, it will be neutral. What we can do is we can, as we pull back our color boost, so let's see here. I'm going to grab our color boost and we're going to back it out till most of the image is black and white. So if we go all the way, we have a black and white image. You'll notice that as I add a little color boost back in, most of the image is still black and white, but we're able to keep a little bit of saturation in there. Let me see here. Let me adjust this. Reset node. Great. I feel like for some reason I didn't do a great job describing the difference between color boost and saturation. Are there any questions about that? The idea of addition versus subtraction or multiplication? Yeah, close enough.
It kind of makes sense, like, because I learned this kind of concept with Photoshop with the
Cool.
vibrance
Yep.
versus saturation, and I learned real quick like that it would make a difference in your skin tones because, like, say this monkey's face here, it's got this bright red.
Mhm.
You're like, okay, so you have a green background, so you got a photo like portrait
Totally.
she has way too much saturation inside her skin.
Yep.
But you're like, okay, let's take down the vibrance, but now I'm losing all the vibrance inside the grass. The grass doesn't look green anymore.
Definitely.
You can use it in the midtone transition.
Yep, yep. So that's a great addition. Another way to think of it is if you're trying to take down the most saturated parts of your image, turning down saturation is good. If you're trying to desaturate the lowest saturation points, color boost is a good thing to do there as well. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is the difference between linear and S-curve contrast. All right, we talked about linear contrast. Here we go. We talked about linear contrast affecting the image. So if we want to add contrast, we can bring the highlights up and the shadows down. There is a contrast tool inside DaVinci Resolve, right? What do we notice about the way this contrast is affecting the image?
Starting from like the outside, just the whites and the blacks, and then meeting in the middle.
Yep. Yes, it's stretching the midtones in a nice way. Now, what do we notice about the whites and the blacks? Are we clipping any information? Is it getting clipped out of the image? No, it's not, which is really nice when we want to add contrast to an image without clipping information. I did want to let you know, for those of you who use DaVinci Resolve, the contrast slider, let me reset this, can work in two separate ways. This is something that you want to know. There is a checkbox in DaVinci Resolve which says use S-curve for contrast. If we do not have this checked, let me uncheck it, and I tweak the contrast, it does not act like an S, right? So oftentimes the standard setting is with S-curve contrast clicked. Yes. So I wanted to let you know that because if you start messing around with the contrast slider and you're like, why is it that I'm clipping information? It could be because that checkbox is not checked there. So in case anyone wants that information, it is under settings, general options, and use S-curve for contrast, which is the place to find that. Now,
And you're saying you generally do want to use
it all depends on how you work, right? There's a bit of a philosophy of when we add S-curve contrast. So let me,
You work without it.
I tend to work without it checked, and give me a brief second here, and I'll show you why. I'm just reset node. Great. So let me show you this. If we add what I would call, so S-curve is not checked. If we add linear contrast to this, so let me just pull our contrast up. We have linear contrast. I don't feel like I'm affecting the aesthetic of the image, if that makes sense. It looks like I'm largely staying true to what was shot. When we have S-curve contrast, I feel like we are affecting the aesthetic. So let me do this. Like it starts to feel different how the shadows roll off with S-curve contrast. It feels like, I don't know, like the way I think of it is like we're changing the aesthetic of the image. So I can add linear contrast with gain and lift. So here is linear contrast, and here's S-curve contrast. There's just like an aesthetic change that happens. So if I'm shot matching, always linear, and if I'm trying to generate like a look, S-curve. Yeah. Oftentimes, when we're grading films, once we set the S-curve for the piece, like we won't change it. Like we'll have a pretty consistent copy and paste there. Great. That is looking good. Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out when it comes to adding contrast to your image, let me make sure I'm going to uncheck S-curve contrast for now, is that there is this little thing called the pivot point. So as we increase contrast, the pivot point, if it is set too low, the whole image gets too bright. See that right there? And if the pivot point is set too high, the whole image gets too dark. Let me jump back to our gray ramp and talk about this. The pivot point pretty much says, where are we going to rotate contrast around? So do you see right now? It's pretty much set at this point of the image. And if we make the pivot point too low, we're going to all of a sudden rotate about around the bottom. Is that making sense? Any questions about like pivot point?
Is that in Premiere Pro too? I don't know that.
You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's, no.
Okay.
So one way that you could do this is in Premiere there is curves, right? So in theory you could pick a point on the curve to like rotate things around, which could work. But yeah, I'm not sure that there's a tool called pivot inside Premiere. Oh yeah.
Pivot only affects contrast, or does it affect like temp and
Oh, the pivot point? Yeah, pivot point just for contrast. Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, pivot point is just for contrast. Let me reset this real quick. Now, what's interesting about the pivot point is, oftentimes when we're adding contrast, we don't want to brighten or darken our image, right? We just want it to stay the same. But different cameras kind of encode the pivot point at different places. So I wanted to show you a little cheat sheet that I have. And that is, I have a YouTube video about this if you want to learn more about it in the future. Depending on the camera you are shooting with, they actually give you the pivot point that you should use to increase contrast on your image without affecting the brightness or darkness. The way this would work is, if you see the RE up here is 0.391. Let's hop into DaVinci Resolve. We type in under pivot 0.391. And we increase contrast. Oh, I'm not on the RE image. Clips. RE. There we go. 0.391. We type it in. We add contrast. And we're not brightening or darkening the image in any way. Like we are adding contrast right at the central point. So if that sounds, let me say, any questions about that? That's a very nerdy point to make. Oh, yeah. So let me see here. There we go. Mid-grade cheat sheet. Yep, feel free to snap a picture. Yes, so the reason behind this, right, is every camera records where they place middle gray a little differently. And so that is the place to do it. Okay, great. Got the pictures? Yes, go for it.
So is the reason that the ACES one is different because doesn't ACES replace the color space of the camera?
Yes, sort of. So for basically, when we go from a flat camera image into ACES, we're slightly adjusting where black, white, and gray are being placed. And so ACES, when things get transformed into ACES, it's trying to make all the gray points at 414, no matter what camera you shot on.
Okay.
Yep. So yes, if you're working with any of those. Yep. Sweet. All right, that is looking good. Any other questions about this? Once again, I know it's kind of a nerdy little digression there. So yes, figure out what camera you shot on. This camera was shot on RE Alexa, so that is the pivot point we would want to use for that. Now, getting to a normalized image. Most images are shot flat, right? When you get cameras, they're shot in a kind of like a flat way where it doesn't have the appropriate contrast. Sometimes the way people solve that issue is by just adding contrast, right? So if I grab lift and gain, I can be like, oh, look at me. I'm adding contrast, and I have a normalized image. However, there are simpler ways of doing this. And I want to show you a tool in DaVinci Resolve. This is, to my understanding, this is unique to DaVinci Resolve, but it's the color space transform. Has anyone messed around with the color space transforms before? Just out of interest. Okay, yeah, Colby. So how have you used them in the past?
Mostly I've kind of experimented with converting other color spaces to airy.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Kind of emulating airy. But now I've switched to mostly using ACES, so it's
cool.
Basically just for ACES transform mostly.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The reason why the color space transform is so, I think it's a really great little tool, is it says, what are you sending in and what do you want out? And it will do a lot of the work for you. So in this example, we have RE Alexa, right? So we can say, RE Alexa, we're getting RE Alexa in. So the color space is RE Alexa. And we know that what we call the flat is the RE log C. And what do we want out? We want out the standard that we use for viewing on screens is called Rec 709. We say Rec 709 out. Gamma 2.4 is the appropriate way of viewing. Look at that. We have a little tool that automatically converts our image to a normalized image, which is really great and helpful. Some other things that I wanted to point out about it is there's this little thing called tone mapping. And let me get rid of the clips. Tone mapping says, how do we want to roll off our highlights? Without tone mapping, you'll notice that we're clipping some parts of this image, like if you look in her hair. Tone mapping says, how are we going to roll that off? And usually luminance mapping is the way to go. Any questions about this tool, the CST? I think it's quite a helpful one.
You said that's only in DaVinci.
There might be. I have not heard of other tools using this. So
They're similar tools.
So the way that we often solve normalizing images in like Premiere is just with like a LUT, right? So you can take like an RE log C LUT to Rec 709 and you can kick it into there. So that's one potential way of solving it.
Okay.
Yeah. Sweet. That is looking good. Okay, let's talk about the next little subject here, and that is working with LUTs. LUTs are a thing that's all over the place. How have you guys used LUTs in the past? Like, what have you been using them for?
I use them in like organized like to balance I use them to balance out images, kind of localize the camera.
Sweet. Yes.
And then I took a LUT, built off of it, and then I tried to create my own thing. So I
Nice.
make my own film.
Oh yeah. That's a great way of doing it. So when it comes to LUTs, just so we're all on the same page, for those of you who know Colin Kelly, he's a really well-known color scientist. Here's what he said: a LUT is a lookup table. It's a static list of numerical values that automatically transform an image, contrast or color. That's it. Any observations on an important part of his definition? Like, what's maybe an important thing inside there? Any guesses? Yeah, static. Here's the thing about LUTs. As much as I do love them, we can't change them. Like, when we put them on our footage, we get what we got. And it only does contrast and color. Those are two important things to remember when it comes to LUTs here. So yes, it can't do things like film grain. Can't do that. Can't do things like noise reduction. It's literally, you get a color in, you get a color out on the other side. So let's talk about what LUTs can do. There's three types of LUTs. First one is a technical LUT. This is where we're changing some sort of technical piece of the image. So let's say that you're over here, you film something with an RE camera. Let me reset this. And you want to say, I want to take flat RE and make it look normalized. Rec 709 is the term we'd used. Well, you can just say, I want RE log C to Rec 709. Drop it on your image. A technical transformation. The second type of LUT is a creative transformation. So this isn't, we're trying to transform the image from a flat space to a normal space. We want some aesthetic adjustment, like some sort of pleasant addition. The way that we could do this is, let me set up a very basic bit of color science here. I'm just going to use, Colby talked about ACEs just a little bit ago. I'm not going to use ACEs for this example. All right, let's see. I'm going to take this and put it into, we call it an intermediate color space. DaVinci wide gamut. I apologize that I'm setting this up. DaVinci wide gamut. Copy. Paste. And pretty much what I'm doing is just creating a normalized image with a little color science 2.4. All right, so we're back to our normalized image. There are LUTs out there that allow you to just change aesthetic pieces of your image rather than taking it from flat to normalized. So if you see here, if I make this on and off, we're just affecting the look of it. We're not making something flat turn into a normalized image. We would call that a creative LUT. These are very, very helpful because most LUTs end up being what we would call a hybrid LUT, where you're doing some sort of transformation from flat to normalized and have some aesthetic adjustments as well. It's really nice when you can find LUTs that separate those two pieces out. In DaVinci Resolve, there is a film LUT that, if you haven't messed with before, is kind of fun to mess with. It's a Kodak replication LUT, so we can kick it on here. If I just throw this on the footage, it doesn't look right. We don't say, what a nice perspective we have. Oh, well, I'm bringing up my emojis. All LUTs expect something in and something out, and it has to be specific. This LUT, if you ever want to know, this is a nice little cheat thing. You can open up LUTs. I don't know if any of you have actually opened up LUTs before. Most of the time, when you double-click a LUT and open it, they'll tell you what you need to go in and what's coming out on the other side. Once again, very nerdy. Input, cine, and log. Here's the cool thing. Now that you know how, come on, work with me. Now that you know how color space transforms work, we can grab a color space transform and say, okay, we know that this is RE. We know we need Cineon on the other side to feed the LUT properly. And we need to transform the color from RE log C to that one's expecting Rec 709 in. That LUT is expecting Rec 709 in. That is correct. And I want to make sure I got this set up correctly. So we're taking an RE image and we're transforming it to what the LUT expects. It's expecting a certain color and a certain contrast in. And if you look at that, we have a LUT that now looks correct because it's expecting a certain contrast and certain saturation in and spitting it out the other side. So if we don't feed the LUT properly, we get an image that looks wrong. Any questions about that? The idea of feeding LUTs what they want? Yeah, go for it.
Is there a certain program you use to like show the in and outputs for that?
So there's not a great way. If they don't provide you that information, there's almost no way to figure out what the inputs and outputs are if they don't provide it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really unfortunate thing. So, but we talked about most LUTs. If you double click and open them up, they'll tell you this is what we want in. So, Cineon login. Yeah.
That program I'm curious about.
It's any text editor will work. Yeah. Yep. This is just a I think it's called Sublime Text. So yeah, any text editor will work. So just to show you, let me show you another way you can receive this information. Go to my LUTs folder. There is a group of. So this would be like a creative. It should be like a creative LUT for red cameras. They will just tell you. Sorry, please hold while I find the correct one. Here is this is a technical LUT taking red flat footage and making it normalized. It pretty much says, red log, kick us out, Rec 709. So if you're willing to get a little nerdy, you can figure out what it needs in and what's going to kick out on the other side. Any other questions about some of the LUT stuff before we keep going? Thoughts? Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. That is a very good question. I think colorists kind of get a bad rap for like hating on LUTs a little bit. For short form, the shorter the piece, the better LUTs are to work with. Yeah. So the longer projects get, the harder. I don't know. You just run into issues with them, and they're hard to fix. An interesting way, and this is once again, we can find our little grayscale friend. One of the ways that grayscale ramps are helpful is to understand what a LUT's doing. So let's say you like this Kodak LUT. What's it doing? Well, we find, how do I make this bigger? I'm gonna grab this one. Now it's a little more interesting. We throw our grayscale ramp up, and we throw a LUT on top of it. Any observations of how this is changing our image? Yep, it's definitely, so we're getting a little S-curve contrast, right? And what's happening to our highlights, color-wise? Yeah, we're kind of warming them, and yeah, maybe a little washed out as well. And what's happening to kind of our midtones? Yeah, it's cooling, right? If you want to know what goes on inside a LUT, throw it on a grayscale ramp, and you have a really good idea of what's going to happen inside of it. So I find it to be an incredibly helpful tool when I'm analyzing, like, what's happening with LUTs. All right, 3 types of LUTs: technical transform, creative transform, and hybrid is just a combination of the two, right? You're moving from if you're going to move from a flat to a normalized perspective, that would be a technical change, and the creative LUT is some sort of aesthetic adjustment. How about this? What can't LUTs do? I'm just going to move those notes along. Power windows, vignettes, you can't do it in a LUT, right? If you like that. Not possible. Things like film grain or bloom or softening, like trying to like emulate some sort of filter in front of the camera. Can't do that. Noise reduction, auto color, doesn't happen. You can't affect what goes on inside of it. It's kind of a black box. And if you don't feed it the right information, it doesn't matter. Like it will not give you the image that you are looking for on the other side. So I mentioned this already, but one of the things we want to do often is separate the creative from the technical. If you have the ability to do that with your LUTs, you're in a really good spot. So why do we use them? And this kind of goes to your question of, well, when do we want to use them? They are really lightweight. You don't have to have a fancy computer in order to run LUTs well. If you find something, it's very lightweight. Some people like the fact that it's little work. It's not a lot of work. If you like the adjustment, throw it on your piece. You got it. And they work in all tools. Premiere, like Resolve, Final Cut, it doesn't matter. Some reasons why not to is they are inherently destructive. If you clip information on a LUT, like if you have highlights that get clipped, there's nothing you can do about it. Like that information is lost and you can't recover it. And like Colby was mentioning, if you don't know the ins or the outs, you don't know what it's expecting in, and you don't know what it's expecting on the other side, completely useless. Like there's no way you'll get a response out of it that you want. And it can't accept user input, which some people like that it's very simple. Some people don't. Let me do a quick check. I think I might have a. Do I have the show LUT for? Oh, no, I don't have that easily available. I was thinking I might have, because we're working on Vindication Season 3 right now, and I was going to see if I could pull the show LUT for it, but I don't think I have that on this computer. That's great. Okay, LUTs. One of the helpful ways to use LUTs is through what we would call a show LUT. A show LUT is basically, we talk through color and we say, what are the aesthetic choices we want to make over the course of the film? Usually we shoot some test footage towards the beginning, we make some color adjustments. We can actually export those color adjustments and give them to production. So you like a certain amount of S-curve contrast, you like a certain amount of saturation, we can give that to production, and they can use it along the way. One of the ways that this is helpful is for visual effects. For those of you who like visual effects, most of the time you want to work on source footage for visual effects, but you kind of want to see what color looks like on the back end while you're doing the visual effects. You can put a show LUT on top of the flat footage and work in visual effects, and before you export it, take the show LUT off, and you're gonna have the colorist will have all the information they need, and you won't have to worry about baking in a look at that point. All right, that is in a good spot. Let's wrap some of our time together with a discussion on secondaries. Let me find that little slide there. So secondaries, the whole point of secondaries is we're targeting certain portions of the frame. So if primaries affect the whole thing, secondaries are picking out some. So power windows are a really helpful tool as we're doing this. Give me a second here. For those of you who have used power windows before, an easy way to create something like a vignette, right? We need to grab a circle, you create the circle. Once again, this is showing where of the image are going to be affected. So right now we're affecting the inside of the image, but if we flip that here, we can invert that and affect only the outside of the image. And an easy way to create a vignette is, I'm going to go a little extreme there, drop the outside. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about DaVinci Resolve is this idea of creating an inside and outside power window. This is a little bit nerdy here, but if you've ever seen these little blue icons on the bottom of nodes, the blue icons are just saying what area of the image is selected. Okay, so we can say in node 1, where we have just the outside of the circle selected, we can actually pump that into a second node. And on the key page, give me a second while I find the key page. Where are you, key page? There we go. We can actually invert the selection. So on node 1, we're selecting the outside. On node 2, only the inside. And so sometimes people call these inside-outside vignettes. Without a lot of work, we can choose to just flip the signal and select both of those. Sometimes people like this if they are generating sometimes looks. You want to just select the skin tones, and then you want to affect everything that's not a skin tone. In node 1, you could key just the skin tones. Let me reset that. You could key just the skin tones with an example like pull a key just for skin tones. And then in the second node, you have everything that is not a skin tone selected. It's a really easy, simple way to split up adjustments like that. That's not the best key in the world, but I think you get the idea there. Inside, another thing that's worth knowing is inside DaVinci Resolve, they have very, very good tracking abilities. So I wanted to show you this. This is a shot from a feature film called They Don't Cast Shadows. The way that tracking works is if you pick a part of the frame that you want to highlight, like this is one of the things we did. We wanted to highlight her face. Inside the tracking tab, you can just pretty much say auto track, and let's see how this does. Whoop, pretty good, pretty good. And it tracks the other side. And look at that. We have a window tracked to her face if we wanted to brighten it up a little bit, right? So we could, that's one option there. Let me see, that is looking good. So let's mess around with a couple other secondary tools here. For those of you who have, anyone here messed around with like hue-versus tools? So we call like hue-versus hue, hue-versus saturation. Anyone messed with those before? Yeah, okay, cool. So that is very good. I'm just gonna move over to an image that we can look at. Sorry, give me a sec while I reset that. I'm just going to normalize our image here. RE log C2 rec 709. All right, can I have a volunteer to work on our hue-versus tools? Anyone want to jump up and give this? Yes, thank you. Let me move over here to our curves, hue versus hue. Sweet. So the way to think of hue-versus tools is the first word is what you're going to select. So are we going to select just the reds? So hue, we're going to select the hue, and then we can change the hue. So go ahead and grab the reds and just twist the reds around and see what we're seeing. So do you notice how skin tones are red? We're kind of like, we can tweak and correct skin tones. This is a really nice way. If you love all of your image, but you need to just correct a little skin tone, you can say, what hue do we want to select, and how do we want to rotate that around? Another version of this is hue versus saturation. So once again, the way this works is what hue are we going to select, and then what do we want to do that saturation? So go ahead and once again drop that, or drop it really low and see what happens. Notice how skin tones are getting desaturated, right? So which hue are we selecting? And then saturation as well. I find that it's a really helpful thing when we're like, hey, someone's walking through in the background with like an obnoxiously orange jacket. You know, well where's orange? How can we just drop the jacket back out of that? Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. One tool, I think this tool might be exclusive to DaVinci Resolve, but I want to mention it, is the color warper. And we are seeing this come up more and more. And the way that the color warper works is it's a fairly interesting way of adjusting your image. This is like all the colors, right? All the colors on the entire wheel. You can actually modify colors in an interesting way. Let me adjust this so you can see what's happening. The center of the wheel is neutrals. So let's say that you're working on a scene and you want to cool all the neutrals. You can grab the middle and cool it right off in that direction. But sometimes people want to keep skin tones the same while cooling the rest of the image. A way that you can do that is, if I reset this, as I hover over her skin tones, do you see in the middle of this, it's kind of telling me where her skin tones sit? I can actually select and lock off. Oh, it's selecting more than what I want. Select and lock off skin tones, and then cool the rest of the image. Do you kind of see what that's doing there? We're locking the skin tones and cooling the rest of the image. So in the background, if I enable and disable, do you notice how the everything else is moving cooler, but our skin tones are staying the same? So that's the idea of the color warper. You can say what categories of the image do we want to lock, and move it to the side as well. All right, that is looking good. Let me jump back to make sure I'm not missing my notes, and that is great. So in the end, when it comes to our color tools, oftentimes the names change. And that's a huge pain in the neck for us. But with things like the grayscale ramp, and I've also provided some of those saturation adjustment tools as well, like you should be able to learn what's going on inside of it. Like I firmly believe that as we know our tools, we get better at what we do. So that's what we got for today. Thank you so much, guys.